You think you are a modern human, but every morning you wake up and reenact a medieval ritual so ancient it should have died sometime around the invention of soap. The strangest part is that you do it without hesitation, like a perfectly obedient monk who has forgotten why he chants. This story begins with that tiny truth. The day you live, the routine you follow, the gestures you perform, even the polite noises you make in public, all of them were designed centuries ago by frightened people who believed demons perched on spoons and that God audited your behavior hourly. So before we go any further, take a slow breath. Dim the lights a little. Imagine you are sitting by a candle in a stone room, listening to a storyteller who knows too much about human foolishness. Because tonight, we are peeling back the surface of your normal life to reveal the medieval scaffolding still holding it up. It will be dark, funny, a little unsettling, and once you hear it, you will never unhear it. Let us start with the sound that drags you from your bed every morning. You call it an alarm. You blame it on your job, your boss, or capitalism. But the truth is far stranger. That sound is only the modern version of a monk ringing a bell at dawn, forcing an entire monastery to wake, pray, chant, regret their choices, and get on with the day. Monks invented the schedule. Monks carved the day into sacred slices. Monks created the idea that time must be obeyed. And centuries later, factories stole that system, removed the prayer, and plugged in paperwork. Now you, a supposedly free individual, live according to a time structure created by men who debated how many demons could dance on a butter knife. You feel modern, but your daily schedule is medieval discipline disguised as productivity. Now imagine you are sitting in a coffee shop, steam rising from your cup. A stranger at the next table sneezes loudly. Without thinking, you whisper, "Bless you." It feels polite, reflexive, human. But that whisper comes from the 6th century, when Europe believed that sneezing opened a momentary doorway for your soul to escape through your nose. The devil, apparently always waiting for an opportunity, would seize the soul mid-air like a thief catching a coin. Pope Gregory the Great decided to fix this horrifying cosmic plumbing issue by ordering the faithful to shout, "God bless you," every time someone sneezed, as if sealing the soul back into the body with verbal glue. Today, you do not believe your soul is trying to escape, yet you still perform the ritual because it is wired into your reflexes, like a tiny exorcism programmed into your tongue. Let us move to your dinner table. You probably believe you are sophisticated when you hold your fork, but for centuries that little metal tool was treated like a satanic relic. When a Byzantine noblewoman brought golden forks to Italy in the 11th century, priests panicked. They declared that God had already provided perfect eating utensils in the form of human fingers, and that anyone using a shiny, pronged object was insulting divine craftsmanship. When that noblewoman later died of the plague, the church proudly announced it was punishment for using a fork. So Europeans continued to eat with their hands like noble cavemen for centuries. Meanwhile, countless people died of foodborne illness. But no amount of dysentery could convince the clergy that forks might be useful. Today, when you twirl spaghetti around a fork, you are participating in an act that was once a moral scandal. Now picture the moment you meet someone new. You extend your hand politely. They grip yours in return. The handshake is so ordinary that you barely think about it, but it was invented in the Middle Ages as a way to prove you were not about to stab someone. Everyone carried weapons back then. Everyone owed someone money. Everyone suspected everyone else. So two men would extend their empty right hands to show they were not holding daggers. The shaking motion evolved to make sure no blade was hidden up the sleeve. Your friendly greeting today is nothing more than a survival ritual from a world where trust was a gamble and sleeves were suspicious. But nothing reveals medieval thinking quite like the wedding ring. You may believe it symbolizes eternal love, unity, soulmates, and other poetic illusions. But originally, the ring was simply proof of ownership. In ancient Rome, a man gave a ring to a woman to show that she belonged to him. During the Middle Ages, the church adopted this practice because it was convenient for legal and social control. They invented the myth of a magical vein running from the fourth finger directly to the heart. That vein does not exist. Medieval medical knowledge thought headaches came from demons and that leeches had degrees in medicine. Yet the romantic lie was beautiful enough to survive. And for nearly 1,000 years, only women wore wedding rings. The man walked freely without any symbol strapped to his body. If that does not feel medieval, it is only because you are used to it. Let us return to your dinner table for a different reason. The manners your parents taught you were not invented to make you polite. They were invented to keep you alive. Medieval dining was a battlefield of germs. People ate from shared trenches carved from stale bread. Everyone dipped their hands into the same pile of food, wiped their greasy fingers on dogs, on clothes, and occasionally on sacred scripture. There were no napkins. There were no personal utensils. The table was less a meal and more an incubator for disease. Eventually, someone had the revolutionary idea that not spitting, not scratching, and not picking your teeth with your knife might prevent death. So, they turned these survival techniques into rules, wrote them down in etiquette manuals, and centuries later we believe they are simply good manners. But deep beneath the surface, every chew with your mouth closed is a tiny echo of medieval disgust management. And what about your weekend? You probably think it is a modern invention of enlightened employers or labor unions. But weekends were originally created because the medieval church demanded that peasants stop working long enough to attend mass. Peasants did not want rest, they wanted to survive. But priests needed an audience, so they declared Sunday sacred and warned that anyone working on that day risked divine punishment. Stories spread. A baker who kneaded dough on Sunday had it turn into snakes. A farmer sharpening his scythe fell dead. Fear was an excellent motivational system. Centuries later, factory owners realized exhausted workers broke machinery, so they borrowed the church's logic and added Saturday afternoon to the schedule. Eventually, this became the modern two-day weekend, a holy compromise between moral supervision and industrial accidents. All of these rituals, these gestures, these polite little habits that decorate your day, come from the same strange place, the Middle Ages, a world we like to imagine as distant and primitive. But the truth is that we still follow their rules. We follow them without questioning. We follow them without knowing. We follow them because humans are not as modern as we pretend to be. Our minds are still shaped by bells, fear, superstition, and traditions that escaped the stone walls where they were born. And this is only the beginning. If the rituals of your ordinary day seem unknowingly medieval, then the architecture of your surroundings is even more so. You walk through automatic doors, sit in cushioned chairs, glance at glass windows, and assume everything around you is the natural shape of modern life. But hidden behind those materials is the same old logic of control, hierarchy, spectacle, and suspicion that shaped the great stone halls of Europe 1,000 years ago. Humans upgrade their buildings faster than they upgrade their instincts, and sometimes the walls we live inside reveal exactly how little we have changed. Consider the idea of privacy, something you imagine is modern, sophisticated, perhaps even tied to individual rights. But privacy, in its earliest form, was nothing more than a curtain, a literal curtain. Homes in the Middle Ages were open spaces where entire families slept in one room, usually with animals snoring near the fireplace and the smell of stew permanently fused into the rafters. When someone wanted privacy, they did not build a wall, they hung a piece of fabric. That was the first bedroom, the first personal space, the first attempt to carve a room out of the chaos of communal living. Centuries later, that idea turned into a social expectation. Doors appeared, locks appeared, individual bedrooms appeared. But the emotional logic behind privacy never changed. Humans wanted a place where eyes could not follow them, where judgment could not slip through cracks, where shame could not breathe down their necks. Today you close a door instead of drawing a curtain. But the instinct is the same. Block the world out before the world decides something about you. Even your windows echo ancient thinking. Medieval people believed windows were portals that allowed spirits, curses, or malicious thoughts to slip inside. They installed shutters not just for weather, but to keep invisible dangers out. When glass windows arrived in the Renaissance, they were considered magical devices that allowed light in, but kept spiritual contamination away. Now you stare at glass every day without realizing that the object was born from superstition, long before it became a simple architectural feature. The modern world feels rational because you no longer remember the fears that shaped it. But if walls and windows carry old anxieties, the true fossil of medieval society lives in our collective behavior. Imagine a crowd today, a concert, a sporting arena, a political rally. The cheering, the chanting, the rising excitement, the sudden shifts of mood. You think it is modern energy, but it is the direct descendant of the same emotional storms that swept through medieval town squares. People screamed at public executions with a kind of euphoric unity. They cheered knights in tournaments like wild animals tasting blood. They joined witch hunts not because they believed justice was happening, but because mass fear feels intoxicating when shared. Humans have always been vulnerable to collective emotion, and nothing illustrates this better than the way medieval cities used sound. Bells controlled everything. Bells announced the start of work, the end of work, the arrival of danger, the beginning of a feast, the spreading of disease, the death of a lord, the coronation of a king. Bells were public emotion carved into metal. When they rang, people moved as one body, one mind, one frightened organism responding to pressure. You may not think modern society uses bells anymore, but listen carefully. Alarm clocks, school bells, timers, phone alerts, sirens, elevator chimes, microwave beeps. Every tone that slices through your day is a descendant of those iron instruments designed to shape human movement. You obey the bell even when the bell is electronic. The medieval system lives on, silently guiding your rhythms. Control, however, was not only maintained through sound, it was also maintained through stories, rituals, and myths that convinced people to behave. And few myths had more power than the belief that the world was full of invisible dangers. Today we think of the Middle Ages as filthy, violent, unsanitary, but medieval people were obsessed with cleanliness. They simply did not understand what cleanliness truly meant. They washed their hands to protect themselves from demons, not germs. They burned herbs to cleanse spaces of evil spirits, not bacteria. They believed that good smells kept angels nearby, and bad smells invited disaster. This logic may sound ridiculous, but you still follow it every day. You buy scented candles because they make you feel calm, safe, protected. You choose certain soaps because their smell feels clean even if the scent has nothing to do with hygiene. You associate fresh air with health because medieval doctors thought wind carried divine blessings. The scientific world replaced the myths, but the emotional architecture remained untouched. You behave the same way, only with better marketing. Even your concept of good people versus bad people echoes medieval psychology. Superstition trained people to believe that evil existed as a contagious condition. A single corrupt neighbor could infect an entire village with moral disease. People avoided the strange, the quiet, the overly independent, the overly cheerful, and anyone who did not conform to expected behavior. Witch hunts were simply the community trying to purge what it believed was spiritual contamination. You may think you are free from such thinking, but your instincts betray you. When someone seems off, your brain flashes warning signals you cannot explain. When a celebrity is accused of wrongdoing, the public reacts instantly, forming digital mobs that resemble the emotional intensity of historical witch hunts. Social punishment, reputation collapse, moral panic, collective outrage. These are not modern inventions. They are medieval instincts wearing modern clothes. This instinct for judgment becomes even darker when we look at how medieval society treated power. People believed that rulers were chosen by God, that authority radiated from heaven like sunlight. Kings were sacred, queens were symbols, nobles were intermediaries between earth and the divine. But the truth beneath these beliefs was simply strategy. Power needed a story to survive. It needed a myth to justify why one family could command thousands of others. And the church provided that myth with devastating efficiency. Today, you no longer believe that kings are sacred. But you still believe in the myth of authority. You trust uniforms without knowing the person wearing them. You obey signs without questioning who wrote them. You respect titles, even when you do not respect the person. Medieval logic whispers through the modern world, telling you that some structures are natural, some hierarchies eternal, some rules too sacred to question. You follow them because they feel right, not because they are right. But nowhere is the strange continuity between ancient and modern life clearer than in the way we inherit cultural memories. Western society is built on layer after layer of traditions, each one shaped by conquest, religion, fear, and the deep desire for order. The Renaissance did not erase the Middle Ages. It only added decoration. Ancient Rome did not vanish. Its bones lie under every legal system, every roadmap, every political ideal. And ancient Egypt, with its devotion to cycles, ritual, and cosmic balance, planted ideas about order and continuity that still influence the Western imagination. To understand this inheritance, imagine you are standing on the edge of a river at night. The water moves slowly, carrying fragments of old worlds past your feet. You see the shadow of a Roman bridge, the outline of a medieval monastery, the glow of a Renaissance palace, the whisper of an Egyptian temple. These shadows drift into the modern city behind you, shaping it in ways you do not notice, enriching it with stories you do not remember, and silently guiding how you think, feel, and behave. You live in the present, but the present never fully escaped the past. It merely learned how to hide it. If you truly want to understand how deeply the past clings to the present, you must follow the thread into the heart of power itself. Because nothing reveals the persistence of ancient logic more vividly than the way society organizes authority. We like to tell ourselves that our modern governments, institutions, and leaders are the result of rational progress. We believe that democracy replaced kings, science replaced superstition, and reason replaced fear. But beneath every polished building and every official ceremony, the bones of the medieval world still jut through the floor like the roots of an old tree refusing to die. Imagine the coronation of a modern monarch. Cameras, velvet robes, the weight of a crown placed gently on a carefully prepared head, thousands watching in silence, millions watching through screens. It looks ceremonial, traditional, refined. But if you peel away the surface, what you find is a ritual older than most nations. A coronation is not about leadership. A coronation is about enchantment. Its purpose is to convince an entire population that a single human being is touched by something larger than life, something holy, something unbreakable. It is a performance of legitimacy, inherited from a world where people believed that God hand-picked rulers the way a gardener selects fruit. You do not need to believe the old theology for the ritual to work. Humans respond to symbolism instinctively. The robe, the crown, the slow procession, the chanting, the music. These elements bypass logic and pierce straight into the emotional core of the human mind. Modern citizens who scoff at the idea of divine right will still tear up during a coronation. They do not realize they are reacting to a formula perfected during the Middle Ages, when rulers needed sacred theatre to keep rebellious nobles from sharpening their swords. And it is not just monarchies. Even in countries that pride themselves on equality, authority slips into costume. Judges wear robes that mimic clerical garments. University officials march in processions wearing gowns that resemble the vestments of medieval scholars who were, quite literally, priests with books. Police badges echo the shields of feudal knights. Military ceremonies, with their polished boots and synchronized movements, resemble the disciplined spectacle of Roman legions more than anything invented in the last 100 years. Modern skyscrapers compete to touch the clouds for the same reason. Height is a psychological weapon. The paperwork has increased, but the social geometry is identical. You can walk into any building today and spot the throne room. It is the office with the biggest desk, the highest windows, the most expensive chair, and the farthest distance from the bathroom. Power always chooses elevation and distance. Castles were built on hills, temples on platforms, thrones on raised steps. The Renaissance introduced elaborate ceilings to make rulers seem closer to heaven. Modern skyscrapers compete to touch the clouds for the same reason. Height is a psychological weapon. But the echo of the Middle Ages grows even stronger when you look at how leaders present themselves as protectors. Medieval kings often posed as fathers to their people, shielding them from chaos, demons, famine, and external enemies. Today, political figures use the same emotional hook. They promise safety from threats you cannot see, offer simple answers to complex questions, and frame the world as a battlefield where only their leadership can maintain stability. It does not matter whether the threats are real. What matters is that fear opens the door, and authority walks through it wearing the same reassuring mask it has worn for 1,000 years. Of course, the Middle Ages were not only defined by authority, they were also shaped by spectacle that kept people entertained, distracted, and emotionally synchronized. And no society mastered the art of spectacle better than Renaissance Italy, especially Rome, where sin and glory danced together in the streets beneath the same golden sunlight. Rome during the Renaissance was a city where absolute piety existed 3 steps away from absolute corruption. Priests prayed in marble halls while noble families plotted murder in candlelit rooms. Artists sculpted angels while mercenaries drank themselves blind in taverns built over ancient ruins. And high above everything, the papal court shone like a jewel, glittering, theatrical, and utterly obsessed with pageantry. Take the infamous Borgia family, for example. Their life was a masterpiece of political theatre. They staged feasts so extravagant that rumour and fact became indistinguishable. They built alliances through flirtation, intimidation, and scandal, weaving a net of influence that stretched across all of Italy. Their power relied not just on strategy, but on the stories whispered about them. People were terrified of the Borgias, not because of what the family actually did, but because of what everyone believed they were capable of doing. Fear, gossip, and awe combined into a psychological force stronger than any sword. This blending of spectacle and power was not unique to Rome. It existed in every major city of the era. In Florence, the Medici family used art as propaganda, turning painters and sculptors into political weapons. In Venice, the Doge travelled through the canals in processions that made him appear godlike, untouchable, eternal. In Paris, royal ceremonies were so ornate that a person could walk away from one and sincerely believe they had glimpsed divine order manifesting in real time. If you think this impulse faded, simply observe a modern celebrity gala, a presidential inauguration, or a billionaire unveiling a new technology. Cameras flash, music swells, crowds gather. A single figure walks on stage, as if emerging from myth. The spectacle is polished, digital, controlled. But the emotional effect is identical to what a citizen of Renaissance Rome experienced when witnessing a papal procession. Humans crave myth made visible. They crave drama wrapped in ceremony. Yet beneath all the glitter and power of the Renaissance lived something even older, something that reaches back beyond the Middle Ages, beyond Rome, deep into the riverbanks of ancient Egypt. Because if the Renaissance perfected spectacle, Egypt invented the blueprint for cosmic order itself. To understand why Western culture still carries Egyptian fingerprints, you must look at how the Nile shaped the Egyptian mind. The Nile was predictable. It flooded every year with almost mathematical precision, depositing rich black silt that made agriculture possible. It was the heartbeat of the civilization, the axis around which everything revolved. Because of this rhythm, Egyptians believed the universe was stable, cyclical, and eternal. Life was not a straight line, but a repeating pattern. Death was not an end, but a doorway. Time was not a river that vanishes into the distance, but a wheel that always comes back around. This worldview seeped into Western culture through Greek philosophers, Roman thinkers, early Christian theology, and later Renaissance scholars who rediscovered ancient texts. Even today, you can feel Egyptian influence in the way people talk about destiny, cycles, balance, and the idea that history repeats itself. It is a quiet inheritance, but a powerful one. And so, as you move through the modern world, every structure, ritual, and emotional instinct around you is braided from centuries of stories: medieval fear, Roman discipline, Renaissance spectacle, Egyptian philosophy. You do not see the braid because it is older than your language, older than your education, older than your sense of self. But you live inside it every day, shaped by its threads, as surely as the people who walked under stone arches and candlelit ceilings long ago. You think you belong to your own time, but your time belongs to the past. If you listen closely enough, the modern world still hums with medieval logic hidden beneath all the LED lights and buttonless touchscreens. Nowhere is this more obvious than in the small, everyday gestures that pass through our lives without a second thought. A polite nod, a quiet apology, a blessing muttered under the breath. These things feel natural, instinctive, harmless. But every one of them is a relic, an emotional fossil left behind by centuries of superstition, fear, and social engineering. Take the handshake. We treat it like a civilized greeting, something mature adults do to signal respect and professionalism. But the handshake was never designed to be polite. It was designed to keep you alive. In the Middle Ages, everyone carried a weapon. Everyone had enemies. Everyone knew someone who had been stabbed in an argument about chickens, saints, or taxes. When two men met on the road or in a marketplace, both had the same question flashing through their minds. Are you going to kill me, or are we cool? Extending the right hand proved that you were not holding a dagger. The shaking part was meant to jiggle your sleeve, in case you were hiding a knife up your arm. It was less, nice to meet you, and more, please do not perforate my organs. And yet we still do it. We still evaluate the firmness, the length, the confidence of the shake as if our survival depends on it. A weak handshake feels unsettling for reasons we cannot name. A strong handshake feels trustworthy, even if the person is an absolute menace. Our bodies remember an ancient danger our minds have forgotten. Another medieval relic slips out of us whenever someone sneezes. We respond with, "Bless you," even though we know sneezing is caused by allergies, dust, or the sudden betrayal of your own sinuses. We know it has nothing to do with demons or souls escaping through nostrils, but the reflex persists. This habit began during the era of plague, when people believed a sneeze meant your spirit was trying to eject itself from your body, like a panicked tenant fleeing a burning house. The devil, apparently lurking nearby at all times, might snatch your soul mid-air. Saying, "God bless you," acted as a verbal shield. A spiritual slap on the door saying, "No trespassing, Satan." And the truly hilarious part is that we still do it. We know it does nothing. We know the sneeze does not summon evil. Yet the medieval logic remains, invisible but irresistible. When we mutter, "Bless you," we are not being polite. We are participating in a mass hallucination that refuses to die. Then there is the fork. That innocent tool sitting next to your plate, shining under restaurant lighting like a harmless piece of modern convenience. But once upon a time, the fork was a scandal, a threat, a demonic invention. Priests denounced it. Scholars debated it. Whole communities panicked because someone dared to put metal between themselves and their food. In medieval Europe, God had given humans fingers. What audacity, what arrogance to replace them with a tiny metallic pitchfork. Using a fork was seen as unnatural, decadent, even sinful. And when an unfortunate Byzantine princess who used gold forks died of the plague, the clergy said, "See, this is what happens when you dine like Satan." Today, of course, refusing to use a fork would get you kicked out of most dinner parties, but the irony remains. Something once considered a tool of the devil is now a symbol of politeness. Civilization is fickle like that. And then we have wedding rings. Those delicate circles of metal people slide onto each other's fingers to declare eternal love. They look romantic. They feel symbolic. But their origin is painfully unromantic. In the Middle Ages, marriage was mostly a business deal, a merger, a legal transfer of property. The ring functioned as a receipt. The groom placed it on the bride's hand to show the community that she was now his. Not metaphorically, literally. Ownership confirmed. Transaction complete. Women did not get to wear rings because of love. They wore them because their bodies, their labor, and their futures were being transferred from father to husband. Men did not wear rings at all until the 20th century, when soldiers wanted a reminder of home and advertisers realized they could sell twice as much jewelry if both partners wore one. Every romantic wedding today is built on a foundation of medieval economics, wrapped in poetry and gold. But if we want to explore the darker, richer layers beneath these traditions, we must climb back into the alleys and palaces of Renaissance Rome, where sin and power intertwined like ivy on broken marble. Rome in the Renaissance was not simply a holy city. It was the world's most dramatic stage play, performed daily by cardinals, nobles, mercenaries, artists, and courtesans who all understood one simple truth. Morality is a costume. Wear it well, and no one questions you. Wear it poorly, and the city devours you. The Borgia family understood this better than anyone. Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI, ruled the Vatican like a crime lord wearing silk. His feasts were legendary, his alliances soaked in intrigue, and his children, Cesare and Lucrezia, became mythological figures of charm, ambition, and scandal. To the public, the Borgias embodied corruption. But behind every rumor lay a deeper truth. They mastered the art of narrative. They used spectacle to intimidate, seduce, or overwhelm their enemies. They understood fear as currency, gossip as weapon, reputation as armor. It is no coincidence that modern politics looks suspiciously like a Renaissance drama. Leaders today use publicity stunts, scandals, media spectacles, and cultivated mystique to manipulate public opinion. The stage has changed. The tactics have not. The Renaissance was the birth of political theatre, and we are still sitting in the audience centuries later, unable to look away. And if Rome was the theatre of sin, then the chariot races of ancient Rome were the theatre of chaos. The Circus Maximus, with its roaring crowds and thundering horses, was not just entertainment. It was an arena where human ambition, fear, and glory clashed openly. Charioteers were slaves who could become legends overnight, adored by thousands and hunted by rivals. Every race was a gamble with death, every victory, a brief taste of divinity, every crash, a warning that fate never stays generous for long. Their world feels distant, but it lingers in ours. Modern sports stars rise and fall by public obsession. Teams become tribes, victories become identities. Stadiums echo with the same primal energy that once filled the Circus Maximus, proving that humans still crave the same blend of danger, spectacle, and worship. But even this thirst for spectacle is only the second oldest inheritance we carry. To find the first, the deepest, the most ancient influence on modern behavior, we must return to the banks of the Nile. Ancient Egyptians mastered something no other civilization achieved. They turned nature into narrative. The Nile became a symbol of renewal, balance, and order. Its floods shaped their sense of time. Its rhythm shaped their faith. Its fertility shaped their politics. Egypt taught the world that tradition is not simply a ritual. It is a story we repeat until it becomes reality. Order comes from rhythm. Stability comes from repetition. And even today, we cling to the same pattern. We repeat what our ancestors did, not because it makes sense, but because it is familiar, because it feels safe, because it feels like the world returning to its center. Modern life insists that we are forward-moving creatures, but the truth is less flattering. We are not marching into the future, we are orbiting the past. Every handshake, every sneeze, every ceremony, every institution is a tiny gravitational pull dragging us back toward ancient logic. We live in a world built on ruins. We follow rules written by ghosts, and we mistake it all for progress. The deeper you travel into the past, the clearer it becomes that the modern world is stitched together from beliefs that once kept entire societies trembling in their boots. People assume culture evolves like software, upgrading itself from primitive nonsense to enlightened logic. But that is the cutest lie humans ever told themselves. Culture does not upgrade. It repackages, polishes, rebrands. The ancient code keeps running in the background, glitchy but indestructible. Look at rituals. We think rituals are conscious choices today. Birthday candles, graduation gowns, wedding vows, national anthems, holiday dinners. They seem wholesome, intentional, civilized. But beneath their soft glow lie the fingerprints of terrified ancestors who used rituals as shields against the unknown. In the Middle Ages, rituals were not sentimental. They were survival scripts. You performed them so the world did not fall apart. A sneeze ritualized so the devil did not suck out your soul. A handshake ritualized so you did not get stabbed. A fork ritualized so you did not get accused of being a shiny-fingered agent of Satan. And if rituals were emotional armor, then symbols were political weapons. Modern society loves symbols, logos, flags, wedding rings, graduation caps, but the meaning behind symbolic behavior is far older and far darker than we like to admit. Take black clothing at funerals. Today, it is framed as somber dignity, a respectful nod to the solemnity of death. But in medieval Europe, black was a signal of wealth. You wore black to show that you could afford the expensive dye, that your grief was genuine because it cost money. The poor wore whatever fabric they owned, which often meant brownish-grey sadness or the colour of "I had no choice." And then Queen Victoria came along centuries later and turned black mourning into a lifestyle marathon. wearing it for 40 years straight until everyone accepted it as universal etiquette. Today, you could attend a funeral in bright colors, and people would look at you like you had announced the second coming of the Antichrist right there at the graveside. But ritual morality always had loopholes, especially for the powerful. In Renaissance Rome, while ordinary citizens cried piously in black, popes and nobles attended funerals draped in luxury fabrics so heavy they could barely walk. They were not mourning, they were performing. Rome perfected the art of signals, holy signals, sinful signals, political signals, and it did so with a kind of theatrical genius the world never recovered from. Think about it. Every major public ritual today carries Roman DNA. Political inaugurations, courtroom ceremonies, academic graduations, even the way we raise our right hand to swear an oath. All of it comes from a civilization that believed omens hid in everything from the flight pattern of birds to the way sacrificial entrails slapped onto the floor. And right in the middle of this ritualistic fever dream stood the Vatican during the Renaissance. Imagine a place where power smelled like incense, velvet, and freshly whispered secrets. The papal courts weren't just religious institutions, they were performance spaces. Every robe, every procession, every candlelit prayer was a meticulously staged psychological operation. It was not simply about faith, it was about hierarchy, it was about control. The church understood something modern marketing departments still struggle to grasp. People obey symbols more than arguments. But the symbols were not always holy. Some were deliciously sinful. Rome's carnival season made sure of that. Once a year, masks came out, inhibitions went down, and the city transformed into a chaotic dance between vice and virtue. Nobles disguised themselves in cheap fabrics to wander the streets unseen. Priests attended masquerades to observe youth, which translated roughly to enjoy all 7 deadly sins before sunrise. Courtesans and nuns swapped costumes just to confuse everyone. And confessions the next morning were, to put it mildly, colorful. That contradiction, sin and sanctity, waltzing arm in arm is what made Renaissance Rome so hypnotic. It was a world where wealthy noble women whispered poetry to their lovers behind velvet curtains, where cardinals sponsored artists who sculpted saints with suspiciously seductive muscles, where papal sons led armies while their sisters negotiated marriages that were equal parts diplomacy and theatre. And through it all, the population watched, gossiped, and imitated. Because that is what humans do best. We copy the powerful. If nobles sinned with style, the people wanted their own version. If the church performed piety with incense and processions, the people imitated that too. Rituals cascaded down the social ladder like perfume spilled from a balcony. But humans did not just copy behavior, they copied architecture too. Look around any modern city, and you will find buildings that owe their existence to medieval fears and Renaissance vanity. Cathedrals taught us vertical dominance, the idea that height equaled holiness, authority, superiority. So today we build skyscrapers to signal economic power, the same way monasteries once built towers to signal divine presence. College campuses with quadrangles and cloisters, government buildings with domes and columns, banks decorated like Greek temples with marble facades. They are all architectural cosplay. We pretend it is modern. It is not. It is a remix of ancient propaganda. Even our obsession with order, schedules, and coordination has medieval fingerprints. We move through time using hours, minutes, and workdays that began in monasteries. Our bright, buzzing cities still run on monastic rhythms. Wake, work, break, prayer. But we swapped prayer for caffeine. Bells became alarms. Monks became managers. Obedience became productivity. The logic never changed. The vocabulary did. And if you really want to see ancient behavior glowing beneath modern skin, visit a sports stadium. It is the closest thing we have to a Roman circus. Fans wear colors like tribal warriors, chant like cult members, and scream at strangers with more passion than they show at family reunions. The athletes become charioteers, symbols of tribal prestige. Sponsors replace patrons, betting apps replace street wagers, and referees replace priests trying desperately to enforce rules nobody wants to follow. If you have ever watched a crowd after a championship game, the resemblance to ancient festivals is uncanny. People crying, hugging, rioting, offering sacrifices to the gods of parking lots. Humans do not evolve. They simply camouflage their rituals with newer vocabulary. Even our sense of time owes more to ancient Egypt than we admit. The Nile gave birth not only to agriculture, but to the idea of predictable cycles: flood, growth, harvest. The Egyptians learned to trust repetition, to see meaning in recurrence. That rhythm shaped the first calendars, the first bureaucracies, the first belief that order can be engineered. Modern life is drenched in Egyptian thinking. We break time into seasons, quarters, fiscal years, semesters, cycles, because a river thousands of miles away refused to behave randomly. We believe in progress, but what we actually believe in is predictability. The Nile whispered that stability is divine. Humanity never forgot the lesson. This is why ancient societies still haunt us. The world is complicated, confusing, overwhelming. Rituals old, new, borrowed, give us the illusion of control. They turn chaos into choreography. They make us feel that someone, somewhere, once figured out the rules. Even if those rules were written by monks who never left their abbeys, by popes with too many lovers, by Roman gamblers screaming at horses, or by Egyptian priests staring at stars reflected in a river. We think we are modern because our phones glow and our cars hum. But inside, we are the same creatures sitting by torchlight, trying desperately to understand the night. There is a peculiar comfort in believing we invented modern problems. We complain about bureaucracy like it is a curse of the digital age, as if paperwork spontaneously spawned from malfunctioning printers and underpaid clerks. But paperwork is older than ink. Bureaucracy predates boredom. The medieval world ran on scrolls, stamps, seals, and men who wore robes, specifically designed to make them look too important to argue with. Imagine filing your taxes in the 12th century. You show up with a goat, a handful of grain, and the apologetic expression of someone who knows the system is about to ruin their afternoon. A monk in a dim office asks your name, occupation, and the number of sins you committed last winter. He does not write it down. No, he dictates it to another monk, whose quill moves across parchment at the speed of despair. This will be copied 3 more times. 1 copy goes to the monastery archives. 1 goes to the regional lord. 1 is stored in case God wants to audit you personally. Fast forward to today, and you would think we had evolved. But no. Now you upload a PDF to a portal that claims to be secure, only to receive an email telling you the file was missing a signature on page 14. The digital monk requests resubmission. He still has the same energy, quiet judgment, and the scent of impending doom. It is the same system, only with better lighting. People do not realize how medieval their everyday frustrations are. Standing in line at government offices? Pure Middle Ages. Back then, you waited outside a hall for hours, hoping the local lord would listen to your request without executing you for breathing incorrectly. Today you wait in an air-conditioned building with a number ticket, but the existential dread is identical. The fear that you will reach the counter only to be told you brought the wrong form has survived for 1,000 years, untouched, like a well-preserved fossil of administrative cruelty. And that terrible feeling of collective outrage, the kind that erupts online over the smallest controversy? Medieval villagers were masters of it long before hashtags existed. They had no newspapers, no television, no internet. They had gossip, church bells, and a remarkable willingness to burn things. A rumor about a strange comet could ignite mass panic. A goat acting suspiciously might be enough to trigger a witch hunt. Nobody needed facts. Facts were optional luxuries, like clean water or understanding Latin. What mattered was the thrill of righteous anger shared by a crowd. And the crowd was a beast of its own. It did not care about truth. It cared about spectacle. Theories were invented, accusations flung, and within hours half the town was gathering around a makeshift platform to watch justice administered with an enthusiasm that would make modern tabloids blush. Today, we have comment sections. Back then, they had literal torches, slightly different tools, identical instincts. The Renaissance elevated outrage to an art form. Rome perfected it. To survive in that city, you needed the agility of a cat, the patience of a monk, and the social instincts of a court jester navigating a den of lions. Rumors spread faster than plague, whispered by servants, repeated by nobles, embellished by priests, and immortalized by poets who needed new material for dinner parties. One wrong word could ruin your reputation. One rumor could erase years of careful performance. If someone powerful disliked you, they did not unfollow you. They exiled you to an island. Or worse, they published a satirical poem mocking the shape of your nose or the mediocrity of your virtue. In Rome, humiliation had agency. It walked, talked, and occasionally wore velvet robes. Yet amid all this theatrical chaos, Renaissance Rome birthed some of the most extraordinary beauty ever imagined. Artists sculpted bodies that glowed with divinity, even when their models were thieves or flirtatious bakers' daughters. Architects created buildings that aimed to touch the heavens, even while the people inside them behaved like characters in a very expensive soap opera. The contradiction was the point. Where corruption thrives, creativity often blooms, like wildflowers feeding on decayed soil. And that terrible feeling of collective outrage, the kind that erupts online over the smallest controversy. Medieval villagers were masters of it long before hashtags existed. They had no newspapers, no television, no internet. They had gossip, church bells, and a remarkable willingness to burn things. A rumor about a strange comet could ignite mass panic. A goat acting suspiciously might be enough to trigger a witch hunt. Nobody needed facts. The painters were the worst-kept secret of all. Raphael, with his cherubic angels and serene Madonnas, lived a life that would make a modern celebrity embarrassment reel look tame. His lovers were whispered about across Rome, though the church pretended not to hear, as long as his frescoes glowed with heavenly calm. Michelangelo, tortured by guilt and genius, painted bodies so perfect that the clergy debated whether they were holy or scandalous. This same strange duality shaped noble women too. They lived like caged birds in palaces decorated with frescoes, their marriages forged as alliances rather than affections. Yet behind their controlled lives, they cultivated entire universes of secret passions. Hidden poems, coded letters, clandestine meetings disguised as pilgrimages. They played the game silently, invisibly, but with a mastery that rivaled the most cunning cardinal. Society may have been patriarchal, but the women of Rome knew something everyone else refused to acknowledge. Power grows in the shadows, and they wielded it carefully, delicately, like a blade hidden inside a jeweled fan. And yet the greatest hypocrisy of Renaissance Rome was not the sinners pretending to be saints. It was the saints pretending not to be sinners. Popes preached virtue while hosting feasts that would have embarrassed Bacchus himself. Cardinals condemned lust while writing love letters in the margins of prayer books. Bishops lectured about modesty while commissioning paintings with enough exposed muscles to make angels blush. It was a world built entirely on duality. Sin beside sanctity, truth beneath performance, desire wrapped in doctrine. And as absurd as it sounds, modern society is not that different. Corporate leaders deliver motivational speeches about ethics while hiding offshore accounts. Politicians post family photos while negotiating scandals behind closed doors. Influencers preach authenticity while editing their lives into polished illusions. We think the Renaissance was dramatic, but we are merely its quieter, more pixelated sequel. Yet it is the oldest civilizations, the ones that felt the river, the sun, the soil, that embedded the deepest habits into us. Ancient Egypt, with its quiet wisdom and cosmic order, carved patterns into the human psyche that still guide our behavior. The Nile taught people to trust cycles, to believe that life comes in seasons, that what disappears will return, that nothing, not even chaos, is permanent. This belief is why humans love routines, patterns, predictability, why we cling to rituals even when we no longer believe in their origins, why we celebrate the new year, mark anniversaries, commemorate deaths, and worship beginnings. The Egyptians saw time as a loop, not a line. Modern society pretends time is linear, but secretly we behave as if everything cycles back: trends, fashions, political mistakes, haircuts, the return of the same problems wearing slightly updated outfits. And maybe that is the grand lesson hiding beneath all these ancient fingerprints on modern habits. Humans do not really move forward. We orbit, We revolve. The scenery changes, but the path repeats. Every era thinks it is the first to invent fear, outrage, ritual, romance, ambition, bureaucracy, hypocrisy, spectacle, and superstition. But the truth is beautifully humbling. We are not pioneers, we are echoes. We are the monks ringing early morning bells. Only now the bells come from smartphones. We are the Roman crowds roaring in the circus. Only now the stadiums have better seats. We are the Egyptians watching the river rise. Only now we check forecasts on weather apps. We are Renaissance nobles putting on performances. Only now the stage is global and the costumes digital. The world feels modern, but the mind inside it remains ancient. The longer you stare into the thread of history, the more you realize that society is not a staircase climbing upward, but a spinning wheel. Ideas circle back. Fears recycle themselves. Customs slip out of graves and stroll casually into the present as if nothing happened. This is especially true when we examine how humans deal with the unknown mystery, illness, chance, disaster. Modern people like to believe we replaced superstition with science, but the truth is less flattering. We layered science on top of superstition like wallpaper covering cracked stone. The stone is still there. The cracks still run deep. Consider luck. Humans claim not to believe in luck, yet our behavior contradicts us constantly. We knock on wood, cross our fingers, avoid walking under ladders, hesitate when we spill salt, whisper wishes to shooting stars, and hope birthdays carry magic. These gestures feel harmless, but their roots crawl back into the ancient world like vines searching for water. Knocking on wood comes from pagan Europe, where trees were believed to house spirits. Knocking summoned protection or warned the spirit you meant no disrespect. Today, people knock on cheap plastic desks and hollow office doors with the same sincerity ancient villagers once reserved for sacred oaks. They knock without thinking, without questioning, as if muscle memory has outlived belief. Crossed fingers, meanwhile, were once a secret symbol between early Christians, a tiny sign of solidarity during an era when being too open about your faith could get you thrown to lions. Now the gesture has been demoted to a superstition about good fortune, used during tests, job interviews, and lottery draws. It is funny how symbols outlive their meanings, drifting through time like ghosts wearing new masks. Walking under ladders brings us straight into the Middle Ages. Ladders leaning against walls formed a triangle, a shape holy to the Christian Trinity. Passing through that sacred shape was believed to invite misfortune because it disrupted divine geometry. People today avoid ladders because they think it is practical safety. But the truth is that superstition carved the rule, and practicality merely adopted it later, like an embarrassed heir trying to rebrand a family tradition. Even the act of throwing salt over your shoulder has medieval fingerprints. In a world where salt was absurdly valuable, literally used as currency spilling, it was considered an omen of impending disaster. The devil was believed to lurk behind the left shoulder, so tossing salt back there acted as a tiny chemical grenade to distract him. Humans still do it today, unconsciously reenacting an invisible battle with a demon nobody believes in. These inherited gestures reveal something profound. The ancient brain inside us is not gone. It simply learned new vocabulary. When people say they are manifesting, they are doing sympathetic magic. When they talk about bad energy, they are describing medieval miasma. When they say the universe is sending signs, they are practicing Egyptian omen, reading with better lighting. But superstition is only the first layer. The even older instinct hiding underneath is fear. And fear has always demanded rituals to protect us, to comfort us, to explain the inexplicable. This is why humans invented taboos, rules so emotional they bypass logic entirely. Many taboos feel random because they are older than memory. Why do people avoid talking about death at dinner? Because in the Middle Ages, death was believed to be contagious through conversation. Why do people hesitate to name newborn babies immediately? Because ancient families feared evil spirits would hear the name and claim the child. Why do we still think weddings need something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue? Because people once believed brides needed magical protections to survive their wedding day, which was considered a spiritually dangerous transition. Modern brides would be horrified to know their quaint traditions began as survival charms, not aesthetic choices. And then there is the taboo that shaped entire civilizations, the fear of the dead. Every culture throughout history has developed elaborate rituals surrounding burial, mourning, and remembrance. These rituals are almost identical across time, not because humans communicated these ideas, but because our fear of mortality generates the same emotional solutions everywhere. Ancient Egyptians mummified bodies so the soul could return. Medieval Europeans feared corpses rising as revenants, so they placed stones in mouths or tied limbs. Victorians posed their dead for photographs to capture a final image before the spirit faded. Today, we embalm bodies, decorate caskets, wear mourning clothes, and hold funerals in carefully choreographed performances of closure. We say these rituals are about respect, but unresolved fear is the real architect. Fear also shaped our sense of collective behavior. Whenever disaster struck, plague, famine, drought, people sought explanations. When explanations failed, they sought scapegoats. The Middle Ages perfected this instinct with brutal efficiency. A failed crop? Blame the neighbor who looked at your cow strangely. A strange illness? Blame midwives, herbalists, foreigners, widows, cats, the weather, or the wrong kind of dream. It did not matter who. What mattered was the feeling that danger had a face. Modern society claims to be above scapegoating, but our behavior screams otherwise. When something goes wrong, we create narratives. We look for culprits. We build stories where cause and effect line up neatly, even when reality is messier. It is not rational, it is comforting. Fear is less terrifying when it wears a human shape. We say these rituals are about respect, but unresolved fear is the real architect. When Renaissance thinkers rediscovered classical philosophy, they added new layers to the ancient instinct. Astrology surged through Europe, convincing nobles and peasants alike that stars controlled fate. Physicians prescribed cures based on planetary alignments. Kings consulted astrologers before battles. Even the Vatican, despite its official disapproval, quietly used astrology to plan certain ceremonies. The Renaissance simply dressed older fears in academic clothing. This instinct reveals itself beautifully in the folklore of ancient civilizations. The Egyptians believed the Nile's failure meant the gods were displeased. The Romans saw comets as omens. Medieval Christians interpreted every misfortune as divine judgment. These were not stupid explanations. They were emotional survival mechanisms. Humans need meaning like crops need sunlight. But the most fascinating continuation of ancient behavior is our obsession with signs. People notice repeating numbers, coincidences, odd dreams, strange coincidences, and instantly try to decode them. We say we are being guided, warned, reminded, aligned. These phrases feel modern, spiritual, gentle, but they originate from the same ancient logic used by Egyptian priests, reading bird flights, or Roman augurs, interpreting the pattern of sacrificed entrails. Humans cannot escape the desire to interpret the universe as if it is speaking personally to us. It is a beautiful flaw, a tragic gift, an ancient instinct that survived every empire, every religion, every scientific revolution. We claim to be rational, but we are pattern-seeking animals lost in a world too big to understand. We read meaning into everything because the alternative is unbearable. And this is why ancient habits still live inside us. They promise that chaos is a puzzle we can solve, that danger is predictable, that the universe is paying attention, that our lives are part of a larger story. We know, logically, that storms form from pressure systems, illnesses from microbes, luck from probability. But emotionally, deep beneath the logic, the ancient voice still whispers, everything happens for a reason. Not because we believe it, but because we need to. If ancient superstition shaped how humans interpret mystery, then ancient hierarchy shaped how we interpret each other. Power is not natural. It is taught. It is rehearsed. It is imitated. And no era understood the choreography of status better than the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, where every gesture, every bow, every glance, every silence carried meaning heavy enough to snap a modern spine. In medieval courts, you did not simply walk into a room. You entered like a planetary body approaching the Sunday. Every step required calibration. If you bowed too deeply, you branded yourself submissive. If you bowed too shallow, you risked being accused of arrogance, which was often resolved through exile, insult, or inconvenient murder. Renaissance etiquette books survive today, many of them so detailed they make modern HR manuals look like children's scribbles. These books taught you how to sit, how to stand, how to hold a cup, how to smile without revealing too much emotion, how to insult someone politely enough that everyone in the room understood, except the victim. And we pretend we left this behind. We pretend our meetings, interviews, boardrooms, and networking events are modern inventions. But the psychology has not changed. The polished conference table is a banquet hall in disguise. The leadership presence everyone talks about is nothing more than feudal charisma repackaged as professionalism. Even small etiquette habits, shaking hands, making eye contact, standing when someone important enters, are filtered down courtly scripts from a world obsessed with rank. Modern workplaces are not democratic gardens. They are castles with Wi-Fi. Everyone knows where the throne is, even when it is disguised as a corner office with a succulent plant and a minimalist bookshelf. People compete for favor. They gossip. They align themselves with factions. They cling to titles. They navigate hierarchy with the same anxious grace as Renaissance courtiers who feared losing the protection of a powerful patron. The truth is both funny and depressing. Humans, regardless of era, behave like actors performing a play written by their ancestors. But if medieval courts were theatre, then Renaissance families were dynasties, not sentimental units of love, but political machines. Marriage was currency, children were assets, bloodlines were strategies. Every alliance was designed with chessboard precision. The Medici, the Borgias, the Sforza, all of them treated their families like corporations with swords. A daughter was a diplomatic bridge. A son was a potential inheritance crisis. An uncle was a wildcard bargaining chip. A widow was a dangerous political actor with too much freedom. Yet amid all this ruthless calculation, genuine emotion still blossomed in hidden corners. Secret loves, forbidden relationships, quiet tenderness exchanged behind closed doors, while the household bustled with plots and obligations. Human hearts rebelled even when society tried to turn them into chess pieces. That tension gave the Renaissance its strange electricity, the blend of public strategy and private longing that shaped everything from poetry to conspiracy. This dynamic becomes even more vivid when we look at Renaissance patronage. Artists survived only because wealthy patrons adopted them, a system that worked like spiritual sponsorship mixed with mafia protection. If a noble liked your work, they fed you, housed you, and used your talent as a status symbol. If they disliked your work, you simply ceased to exist in the artistic ecosystem. Every masterpiece we admire today, the frescoes, the sculptures, the paintings of saints with cheekbones sharp enough to slice bread, was shaped by the ego of someone rich enough to demand beauty on command. Modern creative industries operate under the same logic. Influencers chased by brands, musicians curated by labels, filmmakers shaped by producers. Artists are still sponsored by patrons. The patrons just hide behind corporate logos instead of velvet robes. The Renaissance never ended. It simply migrated into marketing departments. But beyond the glitter and ambition of the Renaissance lies another inheritance: the ancient struggle between order and chaos. Every civilization in history has crafted rituals, politics, and architecture to manage this tension. Medieval Europe feared chaos as demonic. Egypt saw chaos as cosmic imbalance. Rome treated chaos as a political inconvenience to be eliminated through spectacle. And humans today, armed with technology, therapy, and spreadsheets, still fear the same thing: unpredictability. This fear shapes modern life more than we admit. We create schedules, routines, policies, algorithms, all to maintain the illusion that randomness can be wrestled into submission. Yet deep down we know the universe does not negotiate. Storms appear without warning. Illnesses arrive uninvited. Accidents rewrite destinies. And so we cling to ancient habits, not because they work, but because they comfort. Ritual is emotional sedative. This was understood keenly by the charioteers of ancient Rome, whose lives unfolded on the razor-thin line between fame and catastrophe. A charioteer could become a hero in minutes, or die in the same time it takes to blink. The Circus Maximus was not simply a racetrack. It was a laboratory of human emotion, where fear, exhilaration, and fate collided in a chaotic ballet of hooves and dust. The crowd worshipped the racers not because they were athletes, but because they embodied the fragility of existence. Watching them was watching destiny sprint at top speed. Modern sports replicate the same ritual. Athletes today are glorified because they take risks on our behalf. They lose and win publicly. They fail and rise dramatically. They remind us of mortality, victory, vulnerability, things we prefer observing rather than experiencing. Fans scream, chant, cry, and rage because the stadium is a socially acceptable arena for ancient instincts. Gladiators may be gone, but the emotional archetype remains intact. If Rome gave us spectacle, then Egypt gave us introspection, the slow, deliberate contemplation of life's patterns. Egyptian priests studied stars, seasons, rituals, and symbols, not merely to control society, but to understand the invisible threads connecting existence. Their worldview was not frantic like Rome's, nor anxious like medieval Europe's. It was rhythmic, meditative, cyclical. They believed wisdom lived in continuity, that the past was not an anchor, but a compass. It is no coincidence that modern wellness culture, with its fascination for mindfulness, cycles, breathwork, and symbolic meaning, quietly echoes Egyptian philosophy more than any other ancient system. We do not consult priests anymore, but we consult therapists, astrologers, coaches, and YouTube gurus who promise alignment, balance, clarity. The language changed, the longing did not. Even the way we design our homes carries ancient fingerprints. The idea of symmetry, of balanced proportions, of harmonious rooms arranged around a central space, all of this traces back to Egyptian principles absorbed into Greek thought, then Roman architecture, then Renaissance revival, then modern interior design blogs pretending they invented the concept last week. Take the simple preference for natural light. Humans claim it improves mood and supports health, and yes, it does, but the emotional attachment goes deeper. Ancient Egyptians saw sunlight as a divine force. Romans worshipped it through sunrooms. Medieval cathedrals built stained glass windows to transform light into revelation. Today, we crave windows and open-plan spaces because ancient instincts whisper that light protects us, nourishes us, anchors us. We cannot explain this preference logically, but we feel it. This echoes through human behavior endlessly. Preferences without explanations, habits without origins, instincts without memory. We move through the world carrying rituals that were designed for deserts, for temples, for stone castles, for plague-ridden villages, for courts dripping in intrigue. We think we are modern, but modernity is just a costume. Beneath the fabric, the ancient creature persists, superstitious, hierarchical, craving meaning, terrified of chaos, enchanted by spectacle, and hungry for ritual. We are the last chapter of a story that began long before we were born. And the past, stubborn and amused, still holds the pen. If ancient instincts shaped how humans navigate power and mystery, then ancient fears shaped how we build safety, real or imagined. The paradox of civilization is that the more we try to control the world, the more complicated our fears become. We think of danger as something we have conquered with locks, alarms, and health insurance, but every one of those solutions is merely a modern translation of a much older prayer whispered in the dark. Consider the fear of night. People today talk about insomnia, sleep hygiene, melatonin, and blue light, as if the struggle to sleep is entirely modern. But long before electricity, the night was an enemy. Darkness felt alive. It swallowed things. It created shapes. It breathed. Medieval villagers believed that demons traveled through the night air like smoke. They closed shutters not to block cold winds, but to stop spirits from slipping inside. They hung iron objects above beds because iron was thought to repel malevolent creatures. Even the practice of sleeping close to the fire was not only for warmth, it was spiritual defense. And here we are today, surrounding our bedrooms with night lights, phone screens, baby monitors, humidifiers, and white noise machines. We call these comforts scientific, But their emotional root is the same. The fear of being vulnerable in the dark, with nothing but breath and heartbeat to defend you. Humans have always tried to push back the night with light, sound, ritual, or technology. We claim progress, but spiritually we are still sitting by the fire, staring into shadows. That same primal fear shaped how humans understood sickness. Illness was once a supernatural intruder, a curse, a punishment, a malevolent presence. Medieval doctors believed disease entered through bad air, cursed rivers, sinful thoughts, or angry ancestors. Before the concept of germs, sickness was not biological, it was moral. If you were sick, you had done something wrong. You were spiritually contaminated. This logic might seem barbaric now, but look carefully and you will see the pattern alive and well. People shame others for getting sick, as if health were a moral achievement. They treat illness as a failure of discipline, character, or positivity. You should have eaten better. You should have exercised. You should have been less stressed. You should have seen the signs. We disguise judgment inside wellness advice, but the instinct is identical to the medieval belief that sickness reveals inner weakness. Even quarantine, that hallmark of modern public health, has ancient echoes. In Venice during the plague, ships were forced to wait at harbour for 40 days quarantagiorni before unloading, because people hoped time alone would cleanse invisible evil. Today, quarantine is based on science, yet the emotional experience is eerily similar. Isolation, uncertainty, suspicion, the fear that you carry invisible danger, the instinct to avoid others, even loved ones, the sense that your body itself is a threat. Fear, once ritualized, survives with stubborn loyalty. Another layer of fear survived through architecture, particularly fortifications. Forts, walls, gates, moats. These were psychological tools as much as military ones. They reassured people that danger was outside the barrier, not inside. Medieval cities had massive walls because they needed them, yes, but also because humans craved the illusion of containment. A city without walls was a body without skin. Today we build digital walls instead. Passwords, firewalls, encryption, surveillance systems. We lock our phones, our apps, our browsers, our doors. People use security systems with 3 cameras and an alarm loud enough to wake neighboring galaxies, yet still feel unsafe. Because the modern intrusion is invisible and abstract data theft, algorithmic tracking, identity leaks. It is the same fear, only digitized. This impulse to create safety through structure appears beautifully in ancient Egypt. Temples were designed as spiritual fortresses. Every chamber, every corridor, every column represented layers of protection for the divine. The architecture itself was a ritual, a journey from chaos to order. Entering a temple was an act of purification, each step moving you deeper into cosmic stability. Today, hospitals and courthouses and universities mimic this design subconsciously. Wide entrances, narrow hallways, rooms of increasing importance arranged like sacred sequences. We believe these layouts are practical, but their emotional resonance comes from structures built thousands of years earlier along the Nile. And then there is the fear of the unknown future, which no civilization ever conquered. When ancient societies looked ahead, they saw shadows shaped by gods. When medieval societies looked ahead, they saw prophecies and omens. The Renaissance added astrology and divine geometry. We added statistics. But the anxiety is unchanged. People consult economists the same way Romans consulted augurs. They read market predictions with the same reverence Egyptians gave to star charts. Forecasting has replaced fortune-telling, yet both practices serve the same purpose: to soothe the unbearable tension of not knowing what tomorrow holds. And when forecasts fail, as they inevitably do, people react with the same mixture of shock and denial that their ancestors felt when omens proved false. The desire for certainty is ancient. The refusal to accept randomness is eternal. This desire pushes us toward rituals of preparation, emergency kits, insurance policies, backup plans, duplicate files, extra charges, stockpiled food. Humans hoard certainty the way ancient people hoarded amulets, not because it prevents disaster, but because it calms the part of the mind that never learned to trust uncertainty. This instinct shaped warrior cultures as well. Consider the knights of medieval Europe. Their armor was not only protection, it was performance. Knights knew metal could not stop every blade, but armor created a psychological buffer, turning fear into ritual. The process of suiting up one piece at a time transformed vulnerable humans into icons of strength. Today we reenact the ritual every morning with our suits, uniforms, makeup, hair, accessories. We call it professionalism or presentation, but emotionally it is armor. We are preparing for battle, social, economic, psychological, just as knights once did. But knights were amateurs compared to Roman soldiers, whose discipline became legendary. The Roman legion was built around structure, ritual, repetition. Drills turned fear into muscle memory. Standards and banners turned identity into architecture. Soldiers marched in unison not because it looked impressive, but because synchronized movement dissolves individual terror. Even today, synchronized behavior, military parades, pep rallies, corporate chants, stadium waves creates unity by silencing the individual voice. It is tribal psychology, unchanged since antiquity. Humans crave unity because being alone once meant dying alone. Our desire to sync, align, belong is not cultural, it is biological. This is why people join fandoms, groups, political movements, clubs, subcultures. They crave a banner to stand under, a tribe to echo, a narrative to share. Modern belonging is still the same ancient medicine for the same ancient wound, loneliness. Ultimately, this ancient fear of vulnerability of death, disease, isolation, chaos shapes almost everything we do. And yet the part that makes it strangely beautiful is that humans have never faced these fears passively. We create meaning. We perform rituals. We sing, build, celebrate, design, organize, invent, worship, narrate, and laugh even in the face of the unknown. Ancient Egyptians responded to death with poetry carved in stone. Medieval peasants responded to suffering with stories told by firelight. Renaissance artists responded to instability by painting heaven into existence. Romans responded to chaos by building roads straight through the wilderness, as if geometry itself could tame fate. We respond by scrolling through our phones at 3 amperes. Searching for answers in glowing rectangles that promise comfort and deliver confusion, but emotionally we are doing the same thing, reaching out in the dark for meaning. Humans never stopped fighting fear, we just changed our tactics. And beneath every tactic, the ancient instincts remain unchanged, undefeated, faithful companions across millennia. If fear shaped the defensive rituals of ancient societies, then aspiration shaped their dreams. Humans have always chased the idea of a better world, more prosperous, more harmonious, more meaningful. But the strange truth is that every civilization, no matter how advanced its dreams, built those dreams using the emotional clay of the past. Even our highest ideals are stitched together from ancestral longings that refuse to vanish. Take the idea of justice. Modern people talk about justice as if we invented fairness. We build courts, laws, and constitutions, believing they rise from reason and enlightenment. But justice is far older than parchment and gavels. It began in the ancient world as balance, a cosmic equation rather than a moral concept. In Egypt, justice was personified by Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order, whose feather was used to weigh souls after death. To Egyptians, justice was not punishment, it was equilibrium. Something delicate that needed constant tending, like the Nile's flood cycle, or the movement of stars. Their courts mimicked this philosophy. Judges sat under images of Ma'at, not to intimidate, but to remind themselves that they were caretakers of balance, not enforcers of wrath. Centuries later, Roman justice took shape not around balance, but around authority. Rome believed justice existed to protect the state. To be Roman was to obey order so the machine of empire could function without friction. When laws were written on bronze tablets, it was less a gesture of fairness and more a display of imperial power. The law was not a shield for citizens, it was a weapon of organization, a beautifully structured system for keeping millions of people in line. And then came the medieval world, where justice transformed again into morality. Courts became stages for divine judgment. Punishments were symbolic acts intended to purify the community. A thief's hand was cut to cleanse the village of moral contamination. A blasphemer was silenced to protect the spiritual fabric of society. It was not justice, it was ritual cleansing. Modern justice, with its robes, oaths, rituals, and ceremonial language, is a collage of all these systems. Courtrooms are temples disguised as offices. Judges elevate themselves physically, sitting on high benches like Roman magistrates. The scales of justice sit behind them like a memory of Ma'at's feather. The solemnity, the silence, the choreography, these are medieval echoes. We pretend our legal system is purely rational, but in truth it is a sacred performance built from thousands of years of inherited symbolism. And if justice inherited ancient dreams, so did the idea of beauty. Beauty is one of humanity's oldest obsessions, and like everything else, it carries layers of history beneath the surface. Egyptians believed beauty reflected divine favor. Their cosmetics were not vanity, but protection. Kohl lined the eyes as a barrier against evil spirits and harsh sunlight. Perfumes were not luxury, but medicine for the soul. Beauty was survival. The Greeks turned beauty into geometry. Their sculptors sought perfect proportions, believing a harmonious body reflected a harmonious mind. Symmetry became a moral ideal. Imperfection was a flaw not of flesh but of character, and the Renaissance revived this obsession with mathematical elegance, merging it with Christian symbolism until angels looked suspiciously like idealized Florentine nobles. Modern beauty norms, of course, claim to be liberated and individualistic. Yet we are still chasing symmetry, youth, radiance qualities, worshipped thousands of years before Instagram existed. We have simply digitized the obsession. Filters replace Kohl. Beauty standards are spread through algorithms instead of temples. But the longing is the same: to be admired, protected, chosen, validated. Beauty is still a prayer disguised as aesthetics. Humanity's yearning for grandeur also finds its roots in ancient architecture. Consider the modern skyscraper. It appears sleek, metallic, futuristic, but its emotional purpose mirrors the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the pyramids of Egypt, the towers of medieval cathedrals. Height has always been a metaphor of ambition, of closeness to the divine, of dominance. A skyscraper is simply a digital age pyramid wearing glass. We think we build upward for practical reasons, but the truth is more primal. Height makes us feel powerful. We want to rise above the chaos. We want the view that gods once had. Ancient Egypt understood this perfectly. Their pyramids were not tombs, they were declarations. Geometry expressed faith, height expressed eternity. Their civilization taught the world that architecture can be metaphysics carved into stone. Later, Gothic cathedrals stretched upward with spires like fingers clawing toward heaven, trying to bridge the distance between earth and divinity. These structures communicated a message that needed no words. Look up. There is something greater than you. And in a strange way, skyscrapers repeat that same message, except now the greater thing is human ambition itself. But civilization is never shaped by physical structures alone. It is shaped by stories, and nowhere is this more evident than in how societies construct heroes. Every culture has its heroic archetypes, and they all descend from the same ancient template. The Egyptians loved the idea of the righteous king who maintained cosmic order. The Greeks adored flawed heroes who suffered for glory. The Romans worshipped disciplined warriors. Medieval Europe celebrated saints, knights, and martyrs. The Renaissance introduced the brilliant but morally complex genius artist, scientist, philosopher. Today, our heroes are a chaotic fusion of all of them: the tortured genius, the fearless rebel, the charismatic leader, the athlete with mythic strength, the influencer with saintly branding. The archetype never vanished. It only changes costumes depending on the century. Human psychology gravitates toward figures who embody our aspirations, fears, contradictions. Heroes are mirrors, polished by time. And then there is the myth of progress itself, the idea that history moves in a straight, upward line of improvement. This belief is deeply modern, yet emotionally ancient. Egyptian cycles told people life repeats. Greek philosophy told them knowledge advances. Christianity told them history is a journey towards salvation. Enlightenment thinkers combined all these ideas into a single narrative. Humanity improves through reason. But life does not follow a staircase. It loops. It imitates. It returns to old ideas with new decorations. The concept of progress comforts us because it lets us believe we have escaped the past. We tell ourselves we are wiser, more rational, more enlightened. And yet our politics, our rituals, our fears, our dreams remain suspiciously familiar. This becomes even more obvious when you look at how humans handle love. People insist love today is modern, equal, emotional, free. But love has always been a battlefield shaped by economic strategies, family alliances, religious expectations, and cosmic symbolism. In ancient Egypt, love was tied to eternity. Couples expected to reunite in the afterlife. In Greece, love was a divine torment inflicted by capricious gods. In Rome, marriage was a contract, and love was a luxury. In medieval Europe, courtly love emerged as a poetic rebellion, romanticizing longing as a form of spiritual devotion. By the Renaissance, love became an aesthetic experience, painted into frescoes and written into sonnets dripping with longing. Modern love combines all these layers: contract, poetry, longing, rebellion, eternity, forming a confused but intoxicating mixture. We think our romantic ideals are fresh, but they are stitched together from ancient metaphysics, medieval myth, and Renaissance fantasy. Every proposal, every vow, every heartbreak carries centuries of inherited emotion. And finally, there is the most ancient dream of all: immortality. Humans no longer build pyramids, but they build legacies, careers, art, children, digital archives, social media footprints. We try to leave marks that will outlive us, the same way pharaohs carved their names into stone. The tools have changed. The instinct has not. We fear oblivion. We crave remembrance. We chase eternity in mortal form. And in doing so, we remain loyal to the oldest story humanity ever told, the story of wanting to matter, even after the last breath. If the story of human civilization is an endless looping of fears, rituals, ambitions, and symbols, then part 11 must lead us deeper into the subconscious, into the habits we do not even recognize as inherited. Because the strangest part of modern society is not the big rituals we preserve, but the tiny, invisible gestures we perform without question. These gestures are like the murmurs of ancient ghosts. They cling to us, shaping decisions we think are rational, when in fact, they are emotional echoes from people long dead. Take the simple instinct to knock before entering a room. Today it seems polite, mundane, barely worth noticing. But knocking was once a survival behavior. In medieval Europe, people lived in overcrowded, unpredictable households. Privacy was a luxury reserved for nobles and sinners. A knock served two purposes: to avoid witnessing something dangerous, a secret meeting, an argument, a ritual, and to avoid being mistaken for an intruder and stabbed before you could say hello. Today, nobody expects to be stabbed in the kitchen, yet we still knock with the same reflexive caution, performing a ritual our ancestors used for self-preservation. Or consider why people talk about the weather with strangers. It is not small talk, it is ancient diplomacy. In agricultural societies, weather was the only neutral topic that could not ignite conflict. Talk about politics and someone might accuse you of treason. Talk about taxes and someone might report you. Talk about religion and someone might burn you. But the weather? Safe, unbiased, shared. A perfect conversational shield. Modern people mimic this instinct unconsciously every time they comment on rain in elevators or complain about heat during awkward moments. We think we are polite. Really, we are reenacting a medieval strategy for avoiding being murdered in public. Another subtle survival behavior lives in the way humans form circles at gatherings. At parties, in classrooms, at work functions, people instinctively arrange themselves in semicircles and rings. Nobody taught us to do this. It is tribal formation behavior, thousands of years old. Ancient campsites formed circles to protect fires. Hunters stood in rings to divide danger evenly. Rituals occurred in circles, so everyone could see the center. That instinct survived into the Renaissance, where courtly gatherings arranged themselves in circular or oval fashions, taller people placed at the edges, powerful people anchoring the formation. And now, at office parties or networking events, people still drift into circles like magnets seeking alignment. Even our habit of lowering our voices when gossiping has ancient roots. In medieval villages, gossip was both currency and danger, a tool for power, a spark for violence, a cause for exile. People learned to whisper as a form of self-defense, training their voices to signal caution. Today, even in safe indoor spaces, the moment gossip begins, voices drop to the same pitch used by peasants hundreds of years ago, sharing whispers about a neighbor who may or may not be kissing the blacksmith's wife. But if social whispers carry the past, then domestic habits carry it even more intimately. Look at the kitchen. The modern kitchen, with its stove, sink, table, tools, is the descendant of ancient hearths. The hearth was the center of life, symbolizing warmth, safety, nourishment, and spirituality. Egyptians considered it sacred. Romans considered it the heart of family unity. Medieval families treated the hearth like a protective altar. The person controlling the fire controlled the household's fate. That emotional attachment never died. People today describe kitchens as the heart of the home, not because they cook there, but because the ancient instinct insists that fire, even metaphorical fire, forms the center of stability. Even in luxurious mansions, the kitchen pulls people like gravity. Parties end up there. Conversations begin there. Arguments dissolve there. Humans gravitate to warmth, because warmth once meant survival. The stove is merely a modern flame. Bedrooms carry equally deep echoes. Ancient people believed sleep was a spiritual journey. Egyptians thought the soul wandered the dream realm at night. Greeks considered dreams messages from gods or reflections of the psyche. Medieval Christians treated dreams as battlegrounds between angels and demons. Renaissance thinkers saw dreams as symbolic codes waiting to be deciphered. Today we analyze dreams with psychology instead of myth, yet the emotional weight remains. We wake up disturbed from nightmares, as if pursued by demons. We wake from pleasant dreams like survivors returning from paradise. We Google interpretations. We search for meaning. The language changed, but the instinct to believe that dreams hold messages never left. Even our beds maintain ritual logic. The idea of having your side of the bed is shockingly ancient. In medieval households, partners slept on specific sides not for comfort but for defense. One slept closest to the door to respond to danger. One slept nearest the wall for protection. Today, couples argue about bedsides as if it is a matter of preference, not realizing they are reenacting ancient survival choreography. And if bedrooms hold quiet rituals, then streets hold loud ones. Watch how people walk in crowds. They create lanes. They avoid eye contact. They calculate distance. They leave pockets of space, forming invisible bubbles of personal territory. This behavior has nothing to do with manners. It is the remnant of ancient migration patterns, village etiquette, and urban survival instincts. Romans mastered crowd flow in forums. Medieval towns developed unspoken rules for market movement. Today we follow those same rules subconsciously. Move with the current. Avoid blocking intersections. Signal with body language. Modern cities run on ancient flock behavior. Even the simple act of holding objects with our dominant hand holds historical logic. Right-handedness was idealized in Roman and medieval societies because weapons were carried in the right hand and shields in the left. The left side became associated with vulnerability. The Latin word for left, sinistra, eventually turned into the English word sinister. Today, left-handed people still suffer subtle prejudice, inherited from societies that built rules around sword-fighting rules that outlived swords. Then there is our collective obsession with documenting everything. People think cameras created this impulse, but humans have been doing it since the first pharaoh carved his victories onto temple walls. Romans carved inscriptions on stone. Medieval chroniclers recorded gossip and prophecy in manuscripts. Renaissance nobles hired painters to immortalize their faces in oil. The desire to record life is simply the desire to resist oblivion. Social media is just the latest pyramid digital stone instead of limestone. Our instinct to display curated versions of ourselves is equally ancient. Egyptians wore talismans that signaled identity. Romans displayed busts of ancestors to prove lineage. Medieval people wore symbols of vocation or virtue. Renaissance nobles curated aesthetics through clothing, art, gardens, and commissioned portraits. Modern humans call it branding or self-expression. But emotionally, it is the same hunger. To be seen as meaningful, desirable, powerful, virtuous, or unforgettable. Even the modern workplace performance review is a bureaucratic descendant of medieval confession. Instead of confessing sins to priests, employees confess weaknesses to managers. Instead of absolution, they receive development plans. The emotional discomfort is identical. Humans hate being evaluated because it activates the same ancient dread of judgment, whether divine or corporate. Yet perhaps the strongest instinct that lingers today is storytelling. Humans cannot survive without stories. We use them to explain fear, justify decisions, romanticize the past, organize chaos, and preserve identity. Every civilization relied on storytelling to build collective memory. Egyptians told stories through myths carved in stone, Greeks through epics, Romans through political propaganda, medieval Europe through religious parables, the Renaissance through art and literature. Today, we binge-watch series, invent narratives for strangers online, assign symbolism to coincidences, and turn lived experiences into stories we tell ourselves. Not because life is a story, but because humans cannot bear the weight of random existence. We wrap our lives in narrative to make them feel coherent. Storytelling is our most ancient technology, the one not made of stone, metal, or code, but of meaning. It is how we process love, loss, triumph, fear, hope, injustice, beauty, and betrayal. It is the thread connecting the first humans who spoke around a fire to us, sitting in the glow of screens. We think we create stories to understand the world, but really, we create stories to understand ourselves. And across thousands of years, through every empire and ruin, one truth stayed constant. The past is never gone. It simply changes costumes. If every habit we carry is a whisper from ancient voices, then the conclusion of this long journey must lead to a place deeper than history. The question of why we hold on to the past at all. Why do medieval fears, Egyptian symbols, Roman spectacle, and Renaissance ambitions still run through our blood when we live in a world of satellites and microchips? What is it about humanity that refuses to move in straight lines? The answer lies in the one thing that has never evolved, the human mind. It changes its vocabulary, but not its architecture. It updates its tools, but not its instincts. And so we behave like creatures made of layers, each one a different century, stacked on top of another, like an archaeological site disguised as a person. Imagine peeling back your modern reflexes one by one. The way you lower your voice in a hallway, the way you avoid stepping on cracks, the way you say sorry when someone bumps into you, the way you check your reflection before entering a room, the way you feel safer when holding a warm drink, the way you stand slightly taller when someone important passes, the way you feel exposed without a phone in your hand, the way you crave ritual on holidays, even if you do not believe in the meaning behind them. Every one of these instincts comes from somewhere older than memory. We inherit behaviors the way we inherit bone structure. The past is not behind us, it is inside us. Nowhere is this more visible than in the way humans confront endings. Ancient civilizations created rituals around death to convince themselves that endings were not absolute. Egyptians imagined elaborate journeys through the afterlife, complete with maps, guardians, and cosmic judges. Their tombs were not graves, they were instruction manuals for eternity. Medieval Europeans believed the soul moved through purgatory like a traveler navigating customs checkpoints. Renaissance thinkers searched for immortality in art, in science, in legacy. Today, we approach endings with the same emotional strategies. We hold funerals. We write eulogies. We preserve photos. We create online memorial pages. We talk about closure as if it were a physical lock. We say someone lives on through memories, through influence, through love expressions that mirror ancient metaphysics. The methods change. The longing does not. Even the act of remembering the dead reveals an ancient instinct. to keep the past alive inside the present. Humans are terrified of forgetting because forgetting feels like betrayal. The Egyptians believed a soul died twice, once when the body stopped breathing, and once when its name was last spoken. That belief echoes today in the way people keep voicemails from loved ones, save old text messages, or whisper the names of those they lost during quiet moments. Memory itself is a ritual. But memory is not the only ancient force shaping us. Hope, too, carries deep ancestral roots. Every civilization believed in something larger than its suffering. Egyptians looked to the stars, Greeks to philosophy, medieval Europeans to divine providence, Renaissance thinkers to human potential, modern society to progress, technology, and the idea that tomorrow will be better even when nothing guarantees it. Hope is not logical. It is inherited. It is the emotional equivalent of fire, passed from one generation to the next, sometimes burning brightly, sometimes flickering, but always present. Without hope, humans collapse. Without meaning, the world becomes unbearable. And so we create meaning the way ancient Egyptians carved hieroglyphs, the way medieval monks illuminated manuscripts, the way Renaissance artists painted heaven, urgently, beautifully, obsessively. This instinct explains why we cling to rituals that no longer make sense, why we repeat phrases we do not believe, why we decorate holidays with symbols older than our language, why we feel compelled to celebrate milestones like birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, ceremonies that exist not for logic but for emotional continuity. Ritual is the way humans remind themselves that time has shape. Even the idea of identity is a ritual. Egyptians expressed identity through amulets and wigs, Romans through family names, medieval people through crests and colors, Renaissance nobles through portraiture, modern people through avatars, social media, fashion, playlists, and curated digital footprints. We build ourselves out of symbols the same way ancient artisans built gods out of gold. We are symbolic creatures, living in a symbolic world. And beneath those symbols runs the deepest continuity of all: community. Humans have never survived alone. Villages, tribes, guilds, courts, parishes, families, factions, all of them were psychological lifeboats created to protect individuals from the vastness of life. Today, we gather in online groups, fandoms, games, co-working spaces, subcultures, gyms, clubs, group chats, and workplaces. The spaces changed. The emotions did not. We still seek belonging because belonging softens existence. Because being witnessed makes life feel real. Because being understood, even briefly, feels like a sacred event. Ancient Egyptians called their community the followers of Ra. Medieval Christians called themselves the body of Christ. Modern people do not give themselves grand poetic names, but the feeling of being part of something larger is unchanged. This is the thread that binds every part of the story you have read. Humans are ancient creatures wearing modern costumes. We move through the world believing we are progressive, scientific, rational. But our choices, our fears, our pleasures, our customs, our dreams still follow pathways carved by ancestors who lived by candlelight and river water. And here lies the final truth. Civilization is not evolution. It is accumulation. A mosaic built from fragments, a cathedral built from ruins, a language made from borrowed syllables. Modern life is not the triumph of the present. It is the choreography of the past performed on a new stage. But this is not a bleak realization. It is a beautiful one. Because if ancient instincts live within us, then so does ancient resilience, ancient creativity, ancient wonder, ancient humor, ancient stubbornness, ancient courage. Humans survived plagues, famines, floods, empires, wars, and the ache of countless personal losses. Yet we kept storytelling, we kept singing, we kept dreaming. That means the best parts of the past are alive in us too. And so, as this long night story comes to an end, imagine yourself once more sitting by a fire, not a literal one, but the inner fire humans carry. The fire that once warmed caves, illuminated manuscripts, fueled revolutions, inspired paintings, and whispered myths across forgotten landscapes. That fire burns inside you now, mingled with the breath of your ancestors. You are modern, yes, but you are also medieval, Roman, Egyptian, Renaissance. You are the sum of every story ever told. You carry centuries in your gestures. You speak languages shaped by empires. You dream with symbols carved in stone. You fear with instincts older than the moon. You love with rituals older than writing. You hope with the stubbornness of every soul who came before you. The past is not behind you. The past walks with you. And the future, when it arrives, will be built from everything you still carry.